Okay, kids, as promised, your first read aloud for Chapter 4 of All Quiet on the Western Front. Okay, so you can either read along with me as I read, or you can just listen. I'm going to pause probably in important parts where I can pose questions and you can mentally answer, or you can think about it and email me, whatever you want to do. Okay, so Chapter 4. We have to go up on wiring fatigue. The motor lorries, so lorry is a truck, okay, it's like a military truck, roll up after dark. We climb in. It is a warm evening, and the twilight seems like a canopy under whose shelter we feel drawn together. Even the stingy Tiadan gives me a cigarette and then a light. We stand jammed in together, shoulder to shoulder. There is no room to sit. We do not expect that. Mueller's in good mood for once. He is wearing his new boots. The engines drone, the lorries bump and rattle. The roads are worn and full of holes. We dare not show a light, so we lurch along and are often almost pitched out, so they don't put any lights on in the vehicle because they're easy targets for the enemy to bomb them if they want, or shoot, or for the planes up in the sky. That does not worry us, however. It can happen if it likes. A broken arm is better than a hole in the guts, and many a man would be thankful enough for such a chance of finding his way home again. Okay, so if you get injured, you get sent home usually. Beside us stream the munition columns in long files. They are making the pace. They overtake us continually. We joke with them and they answer back. A wall becomes visible. It belongs to a house which lies on the side of the road. I suddenly prick up my ears. Am I deceived? Again I hear distinctly the cackle of geese. I glance at Kaczynski. I glance from him to me. We understand one another. Cat, I hear some aspirants for the frying pan over there. He nods. They'll be attended to when we come back. I have their number. Of course Cat has their number. He knows all about every leg of goose within a radius of 15 miles. The lorries arrive at the artillery lines. The gun emplacements are camouflaged with bushes against aerial observation and look like a kind of military feast of the tabernacles. These branches may seem gay and cheerful were not cannon embowered there. The air becomes acrid with the smoke of the guns and the fog. The fumes of powder taste bitter on the tongue. The roar of the guns makes our lorry stagger. The reverberation rolls, raging away to the rear. Everything quakes. Our faces change imperceptibly. We are not, indeed, in the front line, but only in the reserves. Yet in every face can be read, this is the front, now we are within its embrace. So the way the trenches work is like there's a trench here, here, and they're all the way up to the front, right? So as they're driving on their lorry, on their truck, they're slowly getting towards the front. So when they're in the reserves, they're in the very back of the trenches, and they're slowly moving their way to the front. Okay, so they're at the front, but they're not yet ready to fight. They're not at the furthest trench to the fighting. It is not fear. Men who have been up as often as we have become thick-skinned. Only the young recruits are agitated. Cat explains to them, that was a 12-inch. You can tell by the report. Now you'll hear the burst, so 12-inch shell. But the muffled thud of the burst does not reach us. It is swallowed up in the general murmur of the front. Cat listens. There'll be a bombardment tonight. We all listen. The front is restless. The Tommies are firing already, says Crop. So the Tommies is another word for the British soldiers. The shelling can be heard distinctly. It is the English batteries to the right of our section. They are beginning an hour too soon. According to us, they start punctually at 10 o'clock. What's got them, says Mueller. Their clocks must be fast. There'll be a bombardment, I tell you. I can feel it in my bones. Cat shrugs his shoulders. 3 guns open fire close beside us. The burst of flame shoots across the fog. The guns roar and boom. We shiver and are glad to think that we shall be back in the huts early in the morning. Our faces are neither paler nor more flushed than usual. They are not more tense nor more flabby, and yet they are changed. We feel that in our blood a contact has shot home. That is no figure of speech. It is fact. It is the front, the consciousness of the front, that makes this contact. The moment that the first shells whistle over and the air is rent with the explosions, there is a suddenly in our veins, in our hands, in our eyes, a tense waiting, a watching, a heightening alertness, a strange sharpening of the senses. The body, with one bound, is in full readiness. It often seems to me as though it were the vibrating, shuddering air that with a noiseless sleep springs upon us, or as though the front itself emitted an electric current which awakened unknown nerve centers. Every time it is the same. We start out for the front, plain soldiers, either cheerful or gloomy. Then come the first gun emplacements, and every word of our speech has a new ring. Right? So as they get close to the front, their confidence, their The lightheartedness that they had back in the barracks slowly disappears, and as they get closer to the front, right, that reality comes back that, oh no, like we're in war. This is a terrible, terrible thing that's happening to us, and their bodies like have a literal physical reaction. When Cat stands in front of the hut and says, "There'll be a bombardment," that is merely his own opinion. But if he says it here, then the sentence has the sharpness of a bayonet in the moonlight. It cuts through the thought, it thrusts nearer, and speaks to this unknown thing that is awakened in us, a dark meaning. There'll be a bombardment. Perhaps it is our inner and most secret life that shivers and falls on guard. To me, the front is a mysterious whirlpool. Though I am in still water, far away from its center, I feel the whirl of the vortex sucking me slowly, irresistibly, inescapably into itself. From the earth, from the air, sustaining forces pour into us, mostly from the earth. To no man does the earth mean so much as to the soldier. When he presses himself down upon her long and powerfully, when he buries his face and his limbs deep in her, from the fear of death by shell fire, then she is his only friend, his brother, his mother. He stifles his terror, and he cries in her silence and her security. She shelters him and releases him for 10 seconds to live, to run. 10 seconds of life, receives him again, and often forever. Earth, earth, earth. Earth with thy folds and hollows and holes, into which a man may fling himself and crouch down. In the spasm of terror, under the hailing of annihilation, and the bellowing death of the explosions, O earth, thou grantest us the great resisting surge of new-won life. Our being, almost utterly carried away by the fury of the storm, streams back through our hands from thee, and we, thy redeemed ones, bury ourselves in thee, and through the long minutes a mute agony of hope bite into thee with our lips. At the first sound of the droning of the shells, we rush back, in one part of our being, 1,000 years. By the animal instinct that is awakened in us, we are led and protected. It is not conscious. It is far quicker, much more sure, less fallible than consciousness. One cannot explain it. A man is walking along without thought or heed. Suddenly he throws himself down on the ground, and a storm of fragments flies harmlessly over him. Yet he cannot remember either to have heard the shell coming or to have thought of flinging himself down. But he had not abandoned himself to the impulse. He would now be a heap of mangled flesh. It is this other, the second sight in us, that has thrown us to the ground and saved us without our knowing how. If it were not so, there would not be one man alive from Flanders to the Vosges. Vosges? I think those are mountains. We march up, moody or good-tempered soldiers. We reach the zone where the front begins and become on the instant human animals. So one of your questions, right, talks about this idea of Earth and what it means to soldiers and why, what kinds of things does the Earth do? What does it provide, this like solid ground that these soldiers, why do they seek solace in the Earth? I'm not going to tell you because that's one of your questions, so you could try to figure it out. Even if you struggle with it, just give me something. And the second, right, that line where we're instantly human animals, it's like this instinct to survive kicks in, and they're not consciously thinking of, okay, I hear a bullet, gotta throw myself down to survive. They just react, and their bodies are so attuned to the war that the bodies know faster than the mind does. Okay, and careful, every time there's a space between either the words, like in the page, it means that kind of each is like a time change or a setting change. Okay, usually it's a time change. An indignant-looking wood receives us. We pass by the soup kitchens. Under cover of the wood, we climb out. The lorries turn back. They are to collect us again in the morning before dawn. So the trucks drop them off at the trenches, and then they go back. Mist and the smoke of guns lie breast high over the fields. The moon is shining. Along the road, troops file. Their helmets gleam softly in the moonlight. The heads and the rifles stand out above the white mist, nodding heads, rocking barrels. Farther on, the mist ends. Here the heads become figures. Coats, trousers, and boots appear out of the mist as from a milky pool. They become a column. The column marches on, straight ahead. The figures resolve themselves into a block. Individuals are no longer recognizable. The dark wedge presses onward, fantastically topped by the heads and the weapons floating on the milky pool. A column, not men at all. Remember, he keeps, referring to this idea that we're animals, we're not men, we are instinct now, just instinct in bodies. Guns and munition wagons are moving along a crossroad. The backs of the horses shine in the moonlight. Their movements are beautiful. They toss their heads and their eyes gleam. The guns and the wagons float past the dim background of the moonlit landscape. Their riders in their steel helmets resemble knights of a forgotten time. It is strangely beautiful and arresting. We push on to the pioneer dump. Some of us load our shoulders with pointed and twisted iron stakes. Others thrust smooth iron rods through rolls of wire and go off with them. The burdens are awkward and heavy. The ground becomes more broken. From ahead come warnings. Look out, deep shell hole on the left. Mine, trenches. Our eyes peer out, our feet and our sticks feel in front of us before they take the weight of the body. Suddenly the line halts. I butt my face against the roll of wire carried by the man in front and curse. There are some shell-smashed lorries in the road. Another order. Cigarettes and pipes out. We are near the line. So the closer that they get to the front, right, the more destruction and damage. So shell-smashed lorries are just like these trucks that are destroyed by bullets. Okay, and again, they have to put the cigarette lights out because if you're an enemy and you look across the trenches and you see a light, you're going to shoot it. So you have to put those out. An uncertain red glow spreads along the skyline from one end to the other. Oh, sorry, I skipped a paragraph. In the meantime, it has become pitch dark. We skirt a small wood and then have the front line immediately before us. An uncertain red glow spreads along the skyline from one end to the other. It is in perpetual movement, punctuated with the bursts of flame from the nozzles of the batteries. Balls of light rise high above it, silver and red spheres, which explode and rain down in showers of red, white, and green stars. French rockets go up, which unfold a silk parachute to the air and drift slowly down. They light up everything as bright as day. Their light shines on us, and we see our shadows sharply outlined on the ground. They hover for the space of a minute before they burn out. Immediately, fresh ones shoot up the sky, and again green, red, and blue stars. Bombardment, says Cat. The thunder of the guns swells to a single heavy roar, and then breaks up again into separate explosions. The dry bursts of the machine guns rattle. Above us, the air teems with invisible swift movement, with howls, pipings, and hisses. They are smaller shells, and amongst them, booming through the night like an organ, go the great coal boxes and the heavies. They have a hoarse, distant bellow, like a running stag, and make their way high above the howl and whistle of the smaller shells. Reminds me of flocks of wild geese when I hear them. Last autumn, the wild geese flew day after day across the path of the shells. The searchlights began to sweep the dark sky. They slide along it like gigantic tapering rulers. One of them pauses and quivers a little. Immediately, a second is beside him. A black insect is caught between them and tries to escape. The airman. He hesitates, is blinded, and falls. So they're just describing this bombardment, right? Remember what's one of your vocab words, where they literally are just throwing all the ammunition that they have at the enemy. Whether it's bombs, it's cannons, it's machine guns, they're throwing it all in the hopes of, right, like going to take over their trench. It's harder, right, because it's dark, so now, like, it's literally like the explosions are lighting up the sky, almost like fireworks. At regular intervals, we ram in the iron stakes. Two men hold a roll, and the others spool off the barbed wire. So in their trenches, they're literally creating barbed wire, so in case the enemy comes over, that they're going to hopefully impale themselves on the barbed wire first, and then they can't go over the barbed wire to attack them. It is that awful stuff with close-set, long spikes. I am not used to unrolling it and tear my hand. After a few hours, it is done. There is still some time before the lorries come. Most of us lie down and sleep. I try also, but it has turned too chilly. We know we are not from the sea because we are constantly waked by the cold. Once I fell fast asleep. Then, waking suddenly with a start, I do not know where I am. I see the stars, I see the rockets, and for a moment have the impression that I have fallen asleep at a garden fete, so like a garden party. I don't know whether it is morning or evening. I lie in the pale cradle of the twilight and listen for soft words which will come, soft and near. Am I crying? I put my hand to my eyes. It is so fantastic. Am I a child? Smooth skin. It lasts only for a second, then I recognize the silhouette of Kaczynski, the old veteran. He sits quietly and smokes his pipe. A covered pipe, of course. He sees I am awake, he says. That gave you a fright. It was only a nose cap that landed in the bushes over there. I sit up. I feel myself strangely alone. It's good Cat is there. He gazes thoughtfully at the front and says, Why do you find fireworks if they weren't so dangerous? One lands behind us. Some recruits jumped up terrified. A couple minutes later, another comes over, nearer this time. Cat knocks out his pipe. We're in for it. Then it begins in earnest. We crawl away as well as we can in our haste. The next lands fair amongst us. Two fellows cry out. Green rockets shoot up the skyline. Barrage. Oh my god. The mud flies high. Fragments whiz past. The crack of the guns is heard long after the roar of the explosions. Beside us lies a fair-headed recruit in utter terror. He has buried his face in his hands. His helmet has fallen off. I fish hold of it and try to put it back on his head. He looks up, pushes the helmet off, and like a child, creeps under my arm, his head close to my breast. Little shoulders heave. Shoulders just like Kemmerich's. I let him be. So if the helmet should be of some use, I stick it on his behind. Not for a jest, but out of consideration, since that is the highest part. The kid is literally like face down, ass up, right? Like in the trenches. So picture this, right? It's the dead of night. Paul is fallen asleep. He wakes up. He doesn't know where he is because he's dreaming. He's like, what the heck, right? You know, when you sleep and you wake up from a nap, and it's like a good nap, and you're like, I have no idea what's happening. Okay, that happens. As bombardment gets worse, it's getting like their shells that the enemy is throwing are landing closer and closer. Now there's this new recruit, a kid who has probably no idea what he got himself into, is looking to Paul for like some comfort, right? So Paul puts the helmet over his butt. And though there is plenty of meat there, a shot in it can be damned painful. Besides, a man has to lie for months on his belly in the hospital, and afterwards he'd be almost sure to have a limp. It's got somewhere pretty badly. Cries are heard between the explosions. At last it grows quiet. The fire has lifted over us and is now dropping on the reserves. We risk a look. Red rockets shoot up to the sky. Apparently there's an attack coming. Where we are, it is still quiet. I sit up and shake the recruit by the soldier. All over, kid. It's all right this time. He looks around him dazedly. He'll get used to it soon, I tell him. He sees his helmet and puts it on. Gradually he comes to. Then suddenly he turns fire red and looks confused. Cautiously he reaches his hand to his behind and looks at me dismally. I understand at once. Gun shy. That wasn't the reason I had stuck his helmet over it. That's no disgrace, I reassure him. And he's the man before you who has had his pants full after the first bombardment. Go behind that bush there and throw your underpants away. Get along. Right, so the kid's so nervous he literally craps his pants, okay? So, I mean, it's the first time it happens. But, I mean, you gotta give him credit, right? This poor kid. He goes off. Things become quieter, but the cries do not cease. What's up, Albert, I ask. A couple of columns over there got it in the neck. The cries continued. It is not men. They could not cry so terribly. Wounded horses, says Cat. It is unendurable. It is the moaning of the world. It is the martyred creation, wild with anguish, filled with terror and groaning. We are pale. Tittering stands up. God, for God's sake, shoot them. He is a farmer and very fond of horses. It gets under his skin. And then as if deliberately, the fire dies down again. The screaming of the beasts becomes louder. One can no longer distinguish whence in this now quiet silvery landscape it comes. Ghostly, invisible, it is everywhere. Between heaven and earth it rolls on immeasurably. Juddering raves and yells out, shoot them, can't you? Damn you again. They must look after the men first, says Cat quietly. We stand up and try to see where it is. If we can only see the animals, we should be able to endure it better. Wheeler has a pair of glasses. We see a dark group, bears with stretchers, and a larger black clumps moving about. Those are the wounded horses, but not all of them. Some gallop away in the distance, fall down, and then run up further. The belly of one is ripped open, the guts trail out. He becomes tangled in them and falls, then he stands up again. Tittering raises his gun and aims. Cat hits it in the air. Are you mad? Tittering trembles and throws his rifle on the ground. We sit down and hold our ears. With this appalling noise, these groans and screams penetrate. They penetrate everywhere. We can hear almost anything, but now the sweat breaks out on us. We must get up and run no matter where, but these cries can no longer be heard. It is not men, only horses. From the dark groups, stretchers move off again. Then single shots crack out. The black heap convulses and then sinks down. At last. But still it is not the end. The men cannot overtake the wounded beasts, which fly in their pain, their wide mouths open full of anguish. One of the men goes down on one knee. A shot. One horse drops. Another. The last one props itself on its forelegs. It drags itself around in a circle like a merry-go-round. Squatting, it drags round in circles on its stiffened forelegs. Apparently its back is broken. The soldier runs up and shoots it. Slowly, humbly, it sinks to the ground. We take our hands from our ears. The cries are silenced. Only a long-drawn, dying sigh still hangs on the air. Then only again the rockets, the singing of the shells, and the stars there. Most strange. Tittering walks up and down cursing. Like to know what harm they've done. He returns to it once again. His voice is agitated. It sounds almost dignified as he says, I tell you it is the vilest baseness to use horses in the war. We go back. This time we return to the lorries. The sky has become brighter. 3 o'clock in the morning. The breeze is fresh and cool. The pale hour makes our faces look gray. We trudge onward in single file through the trenches and shell holes and come again to the zone of mist. Kaczynski is restive. That's a bad sign. What's up, Cat? Says Crop. I wish I were back home. Home, he means the huts. Not home, right? We'll be out of it soon, Cat. He's nervous. I don't know. We come to the communication trench and then to the open fields. The little wood reappears. We know every foot of ground here. There's a cemetery with the mounds and the black crosses. So right, the guys are now moving away from the front. Okay. That moment, it breaks out behind us, swells, roars, and thunders. We duck down. A cloud of flame shoots up 100 yards ahead of us. The next minute, under a second explosion, part of the wood rises slowly in the air. 3 or 4 trees sail up and then crash to pieces. The shells began to hiss like safety valves. Heavy fire. Take cover, someone yells. Cover. So now, right, all of a sudden, as they're going back, they're getting attacked by the enemy. Okay? There's like a field, and then there's like a set of woods. And these trees are getting uprooted. That's how violent these shells are that they're bombing them with. The fields are flat. The wood is too distant and dangerous. The only cover is the graveyard and the mounds. We stumble across in the dark, and as though he had been spat there, every man lies glued behind a mound. Not a moment too soon. The dark goes mad. It heaves and raves. Darkness blacker than the night rush on us with giant strides, over us and away. The flames of the explosions light up the graveyard. There is no escape anywhere. By the light of the shells, I try to get a view of the fields. They are a surging sea. Daggers of flame from the explosions leap up like fountains. It is impossible for anyone to break through it. The wood vanishes. It is pounded, crushed, torn to pieces. We must stay here in the graveyard. Right, so they take cover behind these graves, and as they're taking cover, the world around them is being completely destroyed. The earth bursts before us. It rains clods. I feel a smack. My sleeve is torn away by a splinter. I shut my fist. No pain. Still, it does not reassure me. Wounds don't hurt till afterwards. I feel the arm all over. It is grazed but sound. Now a crack in the skull, I began to lose consciousness. Like lightning, the thought comes to me, don't faint. I sink down in the black broth and immediately come to the top again. A splinter slashes into my helmet, but has already traveled so far that it does not go through. I wipe the mud out of my eyes. A hole is torn up in front of me. Shells hardly ever land in the same hole twice. I'll get into it. With one lunge, I shoot as flat as a fish over the ground. There it whistles again. Quickly I crouch together, claw for cover, feel something on the left, shove in besides it. It gives way. I groan. The earth leaps. The blast thunders in my ears. I creep under the yielding thing, covering myself with it, draw it over me. It is wood, cloth, cover. Miserable cover against the whizzing splinters. What he's saying is that when they use a shell, like one of the bullets to bomb a hole in the ground, they usually don't aim for the same spot twice because they figure that they're killing everyone there anyway. So he jumps from where he's behind the grave into the shell hole. And as he's doing it, he feels something. He's like, okay, I'm going to use anything that I can to just cover myself from this bombardment because I want to survive. I open my eyes. My fingers grasp a sleeve and arm. A wounded man. I yell to him. No answer. A dead man. My hand gropes farther. Splinters of wood. Now I remember again that we are lying in the graveyard. But the shelling is stronger than everything. It wipes out the sensibilities. I merely crawl still further under the coffin. It shall protect me, though death himself lies into it. So what he literally finds in this shell hole is another dead body in the coffin that the body's in. He's just going to use it for cover, right? Like, again, that social convention. You can't really care about other people dying. You have to save yourself. Before me gapes the shell hole. I grasp it with my eyes as with fists, which with one leap I must be in it. There, I get a smack in the face. A hand clamps on my shoulder. Has the dead man waked up? The hand shakes me. I turn my head. In the second of light, I stare into the face of Kaczynski. He has his mouth wide open and is yelling. I hear nothing. He rattles me, comes near in a momentary lull. His voice reaches me. Gas, pass it on. I grab for my gas mask. Some distance from me there lies someone. I think of nothing but this, that fellow must know. Gas. I call, I lean toward him. I swipe at him with the satchel. He doesn't see. Once again, he merely ducks. It's a recruit. So recruits right in the new kids who don't know anything. I look at Cat desperately. He has his mask on. I pull out mine, too. My helmet falls to one side. It slips over my face. I reach the man. His satchel is on the side nearest me. I seize the mask, pull it over his head. He understands. I let go with a jump, drop into the shell hole. The dull thud of the gas shells mingles with the crashes of the light explosives. A bell sounds between the explosions, gongs, and a metal clappers warn everyone. Gas. Someone plumps down behind me. Another. I wipe the goggles of my mask clear of the moist breath. It is Cat, Crop, and someone else. All 4 of us lie there in heavy, watchful suspense and breathe as lightly as possible. These first minutes with the mask decide between life and death. Is it airtight? I remember the awful sights in the hospital, the gas patients who in long day suffocation cough up their burnt lungs and clots. Cautiously, the mouth applied to the valve, I breathe. The gas still creeps over the ground and sinks into all hollows. Like a big soft jellyfish, it floats into our shell hole and lolls there obscenely. I nudge Cat. It is better to crawl out and lie on top than to stay where the gas collects most. But we don't get as far as that. A second bombardment begins. It is no longer as though the shells roared. It is the earth itself raging. With a crash, something black bears down on us. It lands close beside us, a coffin thrown up. I see Cat move and I call it crawl across. The coffin has hit the fourth pin in her hole on his outstretched arm. He tries to tear off his gas mask with his other hand. Crop seizes him just in time, twists the hand sharply behind his back, and holds it fast. Cat and I proceed to free the wounded arm. The coffin lid is loose and bursts open. We are easily able to pull it off. We toss the corpse out. It slides to the bottom of the shell hole, then we try to loosen the underpart. Fortunately, the man swoons and Crop is able to help us. We no longer have to be careful but work away till the coffin gives with the sigh before the spade that we have dug under it. It has grown lighter. Cat takes a piece of the lid, places it under the shattered arm, and we wrap all our bandages around it. For the moment, we can do no more. Inside the gas mask, my head booms and roars. It is nigh bursting. My lungs are tight. They breathe always the same hot, used-up air. The veins in my temples are swollen. I feel I am suffocating. A gray light filters through to us. I climb out over the edge of the shell hole. In the dirty twilight lies a leg torn clean off. The boot is quite whole. I take that all in at a glance. Now something stands up a few yards distant. I polish the windows, so it's with goggles, right? In my excitement, they are immediately dimmed again. I peer through them. The man there no longer wears his mask. I wait some seconds. He has not collapsed. He looks around, makes a few paces. Rattling in my throat, I tear my mask off too and fall down. The air streams into me like cold water. My eyes are bursting. The wave sweeps over me and extinguishes me. Let me show you what the gas mask looks like in World War I, so you kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with here. So, right, can you imagine they're in the middle of bombardment? Life's, not fun anyway. And they're getting bombed, they're getting shelled. Now they have to deal with gas, right? The poison gas that they have to deal with. These, see, are the masks that they had to wear. So they put them on over their faces, make sure that they're tight, so they pull them back tight. Because if they're not tight, you're going to get gas leaking, and then you're going to suffocate and die anyway, and that's going to be horrific, right? But the problem is there's no ventilation, so you're breathing in the same air, right? You're not getting enough oxygen, right? So you're just breathing in the carbon dioxide over and over again. So Paul waits, so now they're getting bombed. Again, he's running out of air, and he's desperate to get fresh air, so he waits till someone gets up over the shells once the second bombardment's over. And then they take off their mask, and he waits, and he watches, and if they're okay, then he knows it's okay to take off his mask too. Okay? The shelling has ceased. I turn towards the crater, beckoning to the others. They take off their masks. We lift up the wounded man, one taking his splintered arm, and so we stumble off hastily. The graveyard is a mass of wreckage. Coffins of corpses lie strewn about. They have been killed once again, but each of them that was flung up has saved one of us. The hedge is destroyed. The rails of the light railway are torn up and rise stiffly in the air in great arches. Someone lies in front of us. We stop. Crop goes on alone with the wounded man. The man on the ground is a recruit. His hip is covered with blood. He is so exhausted that I feel for my water bottle where I have rum and tea. Cat restrains my hand and stoops over him. What's it? Where's it got you, comrade? His eyes move. He is too weak to answer. We slit open his trousers carefully. He groans. Gently, gently. It is much better. If he has been hit in the stomach, he ought to drink anything. There's no vomiting. That's a good sign. We lay the hip bare. It is one mass of mincemeat and bone splinters. The joint has been hit. This lad won't walk any more. I wet his temple with a moistened finger and give him a swig. His eyes move again. We see now that the right arm is bleeding as well. Cat spreads out 2 wads of dressing as wide as possible so that they will cover the ground. I look for something to bind loosely round it. We have nothing more, so I slip up the wounded man's trouser leg still further in order to use it as a piece of his underpants as a bandage. But he is wearing none. I now look at him closely. He is the fair-headed boy of a little while ago. So this is the same kid, right, that hugged Paul during the bombardment during the middle of the night. In the meantime, Cat has taken a bandage from a dead man's pocket, and we carefully bind the wound. I say to the youngster, who looks at us fixedly, "We're going for a stretcher now." Then he opens his mouth and whispers, "Stay here. We'll be back again soon," says Cat. "We're only going to get a stretcher for you." We don't know if he understands. He whimpers like a child and plucks at us. "Don't go away." Cat looks around and whispers, "Shouldn't we just take a revolver and put an end to it?" The youngster will hardly survive the carrying, and at most he will only last a few days. What he has gone through so far is nothing to what he's in for until he dies. Now he is numb and feels nothing. In an hour he will become one screaming bundle of intolerable pain. Every day that he can live will be a howling torture, and to whom it does not matter whether he has them or not. I nod. "Yes, Cat, we ought to put him out of his misery." He stands still for a moment. He has made up his mind. We look round, but we are no longer alone. A little group is gathering. From the shell holes in the trenches appear heads. We get a stretcher. Cat shakes his head. "Such a kid," he repeats it. "Young innocence." So, right, think about that. How, the war is so bad that they're willing to just kill this kid because they know he's not going to live. And remember, right, with chapter, was it 2, with Kemmerich, where he dies in the hospital, and, the doctor, Paul tries to get the doctor to help him, and he's like, "Listen, kid, I don't know who you're talking about. I've amputated 5 legs today. I cannot keep up with the work." So these boys know that the hospital is not a place of healing and not a place of comfort, but a place where you're just going to leave it up to God to survive, right? Our losses are less than was to be expected. 5 killed and 8 wounded. It was in fact quite a short bombardment. 2 of our dead lie in the upturned graves. We merely throw the earth in on them. We go back. We trot off silently in single file, one behind the other. The wounded are taken to the dressing station. The morning is cloudy. The bearers make a fuss about numbers and tickets. The wounded whimper. It begins to rain. An hour later, we reach our lorries and climb in. There is more room now than there was. Because, right, more men died. The rain becomes heavier. We take our waterproof sheets and spread them over our heads. The rain rattles down and flows off at the sides and streams. Lorries bump through the holes, and we rock to and fro in a half sleep. 2 men in the front of the lorry have long forked poles. They watch for telephone wires, which hang crosswise over the road, so low that they may easily pull our heads off. The 2 fellows take them at the right moment on their poles and lift them over behind us. We hear their call, "Mind, wire," tip the knee in a half sleep, and straighten up again. Monotonously the lorries sway. Monotonously come the calls. Monotonously falls the rain. It falls on our heads and on the heads of the dead up in the line, on the body of the little recruit with the wound that is so too big for his hip. It falls on Kemmerich's grave. It falls in our hearts. An explosion sounds somewhere. We wince. Our eyes become tense. Our hands are ready to vault over the side of the lorry into the ditch by the road. Nothing happens. Only the monotonous cry, "Mind, wire." Our knees bend. We are again half asleep. End of chapter 4.